Tonight, let's talk about one of the strangest novels ever written. A book where almost nothing happens, and yet everything changes forever. If you drift off while listening, that's perfectly fine. This is a story about time slowing down, so you're already in the right mood. Imagine going somewhere for 3 weeks and staying for 7 years. That's the magic mountain. That's what happens to our young hero, Hans Castorp. Hans Castorp is 23, recently graduated as an engineer in Hamburg. He's polite, unremarkable, and about to board a train that will change his life. The train climbs higher. Flat northern Germany gives way to foothills, then mountains. The air thins. The world below shrinks and disappears from view. The Berghof Sanatorium sits high above Davos. It looks like a grand hotel. But everyone here is sick, and many will never leave this mountain. His cousin Joachim meets him at the station. Joachim is a soldier, or wants to be. But tuberculosis has trapped him here for months already. The daily routine is iron. Breakfast at 8, then rest cure on the balcony. Lunch, more rest. Temperature taken 5 times a day with obsessive precision. Something strikes Hans immediately. These patients don't seem desperate to recover. They've settled in. The mountain has become their home, their whole world. The dining hall has 7 tables. Each one is its own little society. Hans learns the patients' names, their nationalities, their temperatures, and their gossip. Then a glass door slams shut. Everyone flinches. A woman walks in late, completely unbothered. Hans turns to look and something inside him shifts. Her name is Claudia Chachat. She's Russian, married, and completely careless about rules. Hans cannot stop watching her. There's something hauntingly familiar about her face. Deep in his memory, a face surfaces. A schoolboy named Pribislav Hip, same slanting eyes, same high cheekbones. Hans once borrowed a pencil from him and never forgot. That pencil meant everything to young Hans. He kept it for a year, never returned it. Now Claudia's eyes bring it all rushing back with startling force. Joachim shows Hans the rest cure ritual. They lie on balcony chairs wrapped in blankets, staring at mountains in complete silence. Hours pass like minutes here. Out of curiosity, Hans borrows a thermometer and takes his own temperature. The mercury reads a slight fever. Hans stares at it with something almost like satisfaction. A fever, his very own fever. It means he belongs here now, not just as a visitor. The mountain has given him permission to stay, and he is grateful. In the garden, a thin man with a magnificent mustache approaches Hans and introduces himself. Ludovico Settembrini, Italian writer, humanist, and self-appointed guardian of reason. Settembrini's warning is blunt. Go home, young man. This place will swallow you whole. The mountain is not medicine. The mountain is a seduction, beautiful and deadly. Hans smiles politely and ignores the advice completely. The mountain is already working its spell on him. The air, the stillness. The beautiful sick woman across the dining hall. Dr. Behrens examines Hans. The doctor is tall, jovial, and slightly frightening. He taps Hans's chest and listens. Then he says those fateful words, a moist spot. 3 weeks become an open sentence. The doctors recommend Hans stay longer, much longer. He writes to Hamburg, postpones his engineering career, and unpacks his trunk completely. Joachim watches Hans settle in with quiet frustration. Joachim wants to leave, to join his regiment, to be a real soldier. But his lungs won't cooperate, and duty keeps him lying down. Something strange happens to time up here. Monday feels like Thursday. October might be March. Hans stops counting days and starts counting temperatures instead, like everyone else. Hans discovers pleasure in the horizontal life. The balcony chair, the blanket, the mountain silence. There's a strange luxury in being told to do absolutely nothing but rest. Patients come and go. Some are declared cured and descend to the flatland. Others are carried down in a different way, quietly, through the back exit, in plain wooden boxes. In the X-ray room, Hans sees his own skeleton glowing on the plate. His ribs, his heart, the shadowy moist spot on his lung. He's looking at his own mortality. Hans asks for Claudia's X-ray portrait and keeps it in his breast pocket. Her bones are more intimate than her face. He carries her skeleton next to his heart. 3 weeks have passed. Hans Castorp has not left. He shows no intention of leaving. The mountain has him now, gently but completely, like snow covering a path. Hamburg feels like a dream he once had. The shipyard, the engineering office, his uncle's house. All of it fading. Replaced by this high white world of illness and beauty. Settembrini is unlike anyone Hans has ever met. He talks about Dante and Petrarch the way other men talk about weather. Ideas are his oxygen, his medicine. His life. His grandfather was an Italian patriot, a Carbonaro who fought for liberty against the Austrians. Settembrini carries that revolutionary fire in his blood, even while coughing into handkerchiefs. Health is a moral duty, Settembrini insists. Illness is not romantic. It does not ennoble. Any philosophy that celebrates suffering is poisoning the soul of civilization itself. Hans finds the Italian fascinating, but also exhausting. Settembrini never stops teaching. Every walk becomes a seminar. Every meal a lesson in enlightenment philosophy and human progress. Claudia Chochet moves through the sanatorium like weather. She arrives late to every meal, slams every door, ignores every convention. Hans watches her the way astronomers watch comets. He arranges his schedule around hers. A coincidental meeting in the hallway. A shared moment at the door. He never speaks to her, but proximity alone makes his temperature rise. Joachim notices everything. Over breakfast one morning, he leans close and warns Hans quietly. She's married, cousin. She's Russian. And she slams doors. None of this will end well. Joachim has his own secret. There's a young Russian woman named Marussia at the neighboring table. He never mentions her by name, but his eyes betray him every single meal. Every 2 weeks, Dr. Krakowski gives a lecture to the patients. His subject is always the same: love. Specifically, the relationship between repressed desire and physical disease. Krakowski's theory is seductive and disturbing. Desire that cannot find its proper expression turns inward, he argues. It attacks the body. Illness is love gone underground, festering in darkness. Krakowski invites Hans for a private psychoanalytic session. Hans politely declines. Something about the doctor's pale face, his sandals, his knowing smile, makes Hans deeply uncomfortable. The sanatorium is full of characters. Hermine Kleefeld whistles when she breathes because of her pneumothorax procedure. She makes it into a party trick, and everyone pretends to laugh. Then there's Frau Stier, who mangles every word she speaks. She says solvent when she means undulant, and credit when she means credo. The dining table winces in unison. Beyond the social comedy, death is always nearby. Someone is always dying on the floor above. The staff removes bodies discreetly. Through corridors the healthy patients never use. Hans visits a dying patient for the first time. Young Karen Karstedt lies in her bed accepting what's coming with extraordinary calm. Hans brings her flowers and doesn't know what to say. Karen smiles at him. She says it's not so bad really. The mountain air is nice. Hans walks back to his room afterward and sits on his bed for a very long time, saying nothing. After that visit, something shifts. Hans begins reading biology textbooks borrowed from the sanatorium library. He wants to understand what life actually is. What separates the living from the dead? The chapter on organic life absorbs him completely. Life, he reads, is a fever of matter. It exists on a knife edge between formation and decay. It is, fundamentally, an illness of the inorganic. Before the mountain, Hans never wondered about anything. He was an engineer who accepted the world as given. Now he questions everything. The sanatorium has made him curious, dangerously, beautifully curious. Settembrini watches Hans's transformation with growing alarm. The young man is not getting better, not getting worse. He's simply sinking deeper into the mountain's embrace, forgetting the world below. Over coffee one afternoon, Settembrini explains time. When every day is the same, he says, time collapses. Monotony devours duration. That's why patients lose years here, without noticing them vanish. Hans pushes back gently. Maybe the flatland teaches you nothing because you're too busy moving. Maybe you need to stop completely to lie still, before the real questions even occur to you. Months pass. It's carnival season, Walpurgis night, even here on the mountain. The sanatorium transforms. Patients don costumes, drink wine, and for one evening, all the rules dissolve. Behind masks, people become bolder. A man who has never spoken to the woman beside him suddenly holds her hand. Hierarchies crumble. The sanatorium becomes almost human for one night. Hans drinks more wine than he should. Dutch courage, liquid warmth. Tonight is the night. He has waited months for a reason to speak to Claudia, and the carnival has given him one. He crosses the room to Claudia. They speak in French, not German. French is the language of intimacy, of things that cannot be said in one's mother tongue. Everything changes between them now. He asks her for a pencil. The same request he made to Pribislav Hippie decades ago. A pencil, the simplest object in the world, carrying the entire weight of his desire and his past. In French, Hans pours out everything. The body, illness, desire, love. It all tangles together in his fevered confession. He tells her she is his dream, his fate, his beautiful sickness. Claudia tells him she's leaving tomorrow, but she gives him something before she goes. Not a kiss, not a promise. Her X-ray portrait. Her bones, offered freely, more naked than nakedness. Morning comes. The carnival decorations look sad in daylight. Claudia's chair at the dining table is empty. She's gone. Hans sits at breakfast holding the X-ray plate under the table. She's gone, but the mountain remains. Hans doesn't fall apart. He simply absorbs the loss into himself, the way the mountain absorbs weather. She was here. Time is meaningless. Sedembrini calls Claudia Lilith, Adam's first wife, the dangerous one. The woman who lures men away from reason and duty, and keeps them enchanted in her garden of disease. Without Claudia, Hans sinks deeper into sanatorium routines. Rest cures, meals, temperature readings. He stops mentioning Hamburg entirely. No one asks when he plans to leave anymore. Thomas Mann compresses time now. Months slide by in paragraphs. Seasons change in sentences. The reader starts losing track too, which is exactly the point. Time is melting for everyone. Joachim grows desperate. Every month on the mountain is another month away from his regiment. He's a soldier without a war, a healthy spirit trapped in unhealthy lungs, and patience has its limits. Joachim announces his decision at breakfast. He's leaving. Dr. Behrens warns him, Sedembrini encourages him, and Hans feels the ground shift beneath his feet. His anchor is departing. That night, Hans and Joachim sit together on the balcony for the last time. They don't say much. The mountains hold their silence. Two cousins, side by side, breathing thin, cold air. Joachim departs on a bright, cold morning. Hans watches from the balcony as the train descends the mountain, growing smaller and smaller until it vanishes into the valley's gray haze. Without Joachim, the sanatorium feels enormous and empty. Hans eats alone at their table. The chair beside him stays vacant. He fills the silence with more books and longer rest cures. A new figure appears in Sedembrini's orbit. Small, sharp, dressed entirely in black. Leo Nafta, former Jesuit, brilliant dialectician. And everything Sedembrini opposes given human form. Nafta's story is extraordinary. Born in a small Jewish village, orphaned by a pogrom, taken in by Jesuits, converted, educated to razor sharpness. He carries centuries of suffering in his voice. His room is a contradiction. A Jesuit who took vows of poverty lives amid silk curtains, fine carpets, and a Gothic Piet that must have cost more than everything Sedembrini owns combined. Their first real argument happens on a walk with Hans. Sedembrini champions reason and individual freedom. Nafta attacks both as shallow illusions. The air between them crackles with intellectual lightning. Hans is caught between two magnetic poles. Sedembrini pulls him toward light, progress, the living world below. Nafta draws him toward darkness, mystery, the seductive depths of suffering and faith. The great debates have begun. Two brilliant men will argue about everything. God, death, politics, love, the meaning of civilization itself, and Hans will sit between them, listening, absorbing, never choosing. Settembrini argues for democracy with the passion of a man whose grandfather died for it. The individual is sacred, he declares. Reason is humanity's only weapon against barbarism. Nafta waits for Settembrini to finish, then dismantles everything with surgical calm. Reason is arrogance, he says. Suffering teaches what comfort never will. Authority protects the weak from themselves. Hans tries to bridge the gap. Can't both be partially right. Maybe reason needs mystery, and faith needs criticism. Both men look at him, as if he's suggested mixing wine with milk. Nafta pushes further into dangerous territory. Terror can be holy, he argues. Revolution purifies. The medieval Inquisition understood something modern Democrats refuse to face about human nature. Settembrini is horrified. This is exactly the thinking that burned people alive, he says. His voice shakes. He has never been more earnest, more frightened by where ideas can lead. Back in his room, Hans reads about thermodynamics. Heat flows from warm to cold, never the reverse. Everything in the universe moves toward disorder. Entropy, they call it. The universe is running down. Entropy fascinates Hans because it mirrors the sanatorium. Everything here tends toward stillness, toward the horizontal. Patients arrive upright and slowly become horizontal. The mountain is entropy made visible. Time dissolves further. Hans can no longer count the months with any confidence. Was it autumn when Claudia left or spring? Has it been 1 year or 2? The calendar has stopped meaning anything. Was it the second winter or the third? Mann himself seems unsure, or pretends to be. The narrator loses count alongside his character. Reader and hero drift together through unmarked time. Then Joachim comes back. Hans sees him in the dining hall one morning and almost doesn't recognize him. His cousin is thinner, paler, and wearing something that makes Hans's heart break. A military uniform. Joachim got his commission. He served with his regiment. He was a real soldier, briefly. But his lungs betrayed him again. And the mountain called him back with an authority no colonel could overrule. The uniform is heartbreaking because of what it represents. Joachim achieved everything he wanted, and it lasted weeks. Now the uniform hangs on a body the mountain is claiming piece by piece. Joachim's condition deteriorates rapidly. The doctors murmur to each other in corridors. His temperature climbs daily. He is confined to bed now. The horizontal life no longer a choice but a sentence. Hans sits with his cousin every day now. Their roles have reversed completely. Hans is the experienced patient, the mountain veteran. Joachim is the one who needs comfort and company. Joachim maintains his military bearing until the very end. He asks to sit up straight. He adjusts his collar. He faces death the way he faced everything, with duty, discipline, and extraordinary quiet courage. Joachim dies. Hans holds his cousin's hand as it goes still. The room fills with a silence that feels different from mountain silence. This silence is final. This silence has teeth. The sanatorium absorbs Joachim's death the way it absorbs everything. Meals continue on schedule. Temperatures are taken. A new patient arrives to occupy his room within the week. The mountain endures. Hans's grief is deeper than he expected. He always knew the mountain could kill. But knowing and experiencing are separated by an ocean. And he has just been swept across it without a boat. Months later, unexpected news ripples through the dining hall. Claudia Chachat is coming back to the Berghof. But the whispers add something else. She's not coming alone this time. Mynheer Peeperkorn arrives like a natural disaster. He's enormous, Dutch, wealthy from colonial plantations, and radiates a personality so powerful it makes the entire sanatorium orbit around him instantly. Peeperkorn speaks in unfinished sentences. He begins grand declarations that trail off into gestures. His words mean nothing. His presence means everything. People hang on syllables that never arrive. Hans watches Claudia at Peeperkorn's side and feels jealousy mixed with awe. This enormous man possesses what Hans could never claim. Not Claudia herself, but the sheer force to hold anything at all. Peeperkorn's philosophy is brutally simple. Feeling is the only thing that matters. Not reason, not faith, not ideology. Can you feel life fully, or can't you? Everything else is academic chatter. For the first time, Sedembrini and Nafta have no answer. Their words bounce off peppercorn like rain off granite. Intellect has met its match in pure, overwhelming personality. Something unexpected happens. Hans and Peppercorn become friends. The young man and the old king, bonded by their shared devotion to the same elusive woman, the rivalry dissolves into affection. Peppercorn throws feasts, lavish, expensive, commanding affairs where gin and wine flow freely. He presides at the head of the table like a king at banquet, demanding that everyone feel the moment fully. On an outing to a mountain waterfall, Peppercorn tries to make a speech. The water roars so loudly no one can hear a word. It doesn't matter. His gestures say everything his voice cannot. Behind the feasts and the grand gestures, Peppercorn harbors a secret terror. His vitality is fading. Age and malaria are winning. For a man whose entire philosophy is feeling, numbness is the worst death imaginable. One evening Hans does something extraordinary. He confesses to Peppercorn that he loves Claudia. Has always loved her. The honesty is reckless and total, offered without expectation of anything in return. Peppercorn accepts it with grace. No jealousy, no rage. Two men who love the same woman clasp hands across the table. It is one of the strangest and most touching moments in all of literature. But Peppercorn's body continues to betray him. His feasts grow shorter, his gestures smaller. The gin stops working. The great personality dims like a lantern running low on oil, and everyone pretends not to notice. Peppercorn chooses his own ending. He takes poison. A tropical snake venom he brought from the colonies. Rather than fade into numbness, the king of personality exits on his own terrible terms. Hans finds the body and stands in the doorway for a long time. The king of personality, silenced forever. Another person the mountain has claimed. The room feels both enormous and suffocating. After Peppercorn's death, Claudia leaves again. This time Hans lets her go without drama. He has learned something about holding on, and something about letting go, though he couldn't name it precisely. Now Hans is truly alone. Joachim is dead. Claudia is gone. Peppercorn is gone. Sedembrini and Nafta argue on, but Hans has no more anchors. He floats on the mountain like a leaf on still water. A gramophone arrives at the sanatorium. Other patients use it casually. Hans becomes its devoted guardian. He organizes the record collection, memorizes every piece, plays music late into the night. One record captures him above all others. Schubert's Lindenbaum, from the Winterreise cycle. A wanderer finds a linden tree. The tree whispers, "Come rest beneath me, sleep here forever." Hans recognizes what the song is really about. It's death dressed in beauty. The linden tree offers rest that never ends. It's the mountain's philosophy set to music. Stop struggling, lie down, surrender. Music becomes another form of enchantment, another reason not to leave. Hans plays the Lindenbaum again and again. He knows it's seductive. He knows it's dangerous. He plays it once more anyway. Meanwhile, Sedembrini and Nafta's debates have escalated from intellectual sparring to something darker. The arguments grow personal. The ideas sharpen into weapons. Philosophy is becoming violent. They argue about sickness and health with new ferocity. Is disease degradation or illumination? Sedembrini says sickness dishonors the body. Nafta says the healthy are simply too dull to learn from suffering. Hans speaks up quietly. Everything he knows, he learned because he was sick. Without the mountain, without the fever, he would still be a blank young engineer counting shipyard contracts in Hamburg. Dr. Krukowski introduces something new to the sanatorium, a séance. The psychoanalyst has been experimenting with the occult. One dark evening, patients gather in a locked room to contact the dead. In the darkness, something appears, a figure in military uniform, thin, erect, familiar. Hans sees Joachim, or believes he does, standing at attention among the living, summoned from whatever comes after. Hans calls out Joachim's name. The room erupts, someone screams. The candle is knocked over. When light returns, the figure is gone. But Hans saw what he saw, and nothing will convince him otherwise. After the séance, Hans questions everything. Was it real? Was it his grief made visible? The boundary between the rational and the supernatural has blurred, and he isn't sure which side he's standing on. Winter deepens. Hans takes up skiing. One crystalline morning, he straps on borrowed skis and heads upward, alone beyond the paths, beyond the trees, into the vast white emptiness above the sanatorium. He climbs higher than he should. Above the tree line, the world becomes pure geometry. White ground, gray sky, no shadows, no landmarks. Direction dissolves. Hans is alone with the mountain's blank face. The storm arrives without warning. Snow drives horizontally. Wind screams. Hans can't see his own hands. He stumbles, falls, gets up, stumbles again. The mountain has stopped pretending to be gentle. Hans collapses against a hay barn wall, exhausted. His legs give out. Snow piles on his shoulders. He slides into a state between sleep and waking. And in that dangerous twilight, the vision begins. The vision begins while Hans leans against the barn wall, half frozen. His eyes close, and suddenly the snow is gone. Warmth floods through him. He's standing somewhere impossibly beautiful. A southern paradise opens before him. Azure sea, warm sand, marble temples gleaming on a hillside. Beautiful people move through sunlit colonnades with effortless grace. This is civilization at its finest. Children play by the sea. Their laughter carries on warm wind. Mothers watch from the shade of olive trees. Old men sit in philosophical conversation. Every gesture radiates health, reason, and gentle joy. Hans walks among them unseen. He feels welcome. This is what humanity could be, he thinks. This is the dream that Settembrini described, rational, beautiful, free. He wants to stay in this vision forever. But then he sees the temple. Set apart on a promontory, darker stone, older architecture. Something in his dream body pulls him toward it against his will. The air grows cold near its entrance. Inside the temple, the vision turns to nightmare. Two ancient women crouch over a cauldron, tearing a child apart with their bare hands. Blood on stone. Horror at the heart of beauty. Hans screams silently. This is the secret the beautiful people know. Behind their gracious colonnades, beneath their sunlit conversations, the blood sacrifice continues. Civilization is built on something it cannot look at directly. Standing between paradise and horror, Hans has his great revelation. For the sake of goodness and love, he thinks, man shall grant death no sovereignty over his thoughts. This is his answer to everything. The dream dissolves. Hans opens his eyes to driving snow and freezing wind. He's against the barn wall, nearly dead. His body is stiff. But something moves him. He forces himself upright and begins to walk. He makes it back. Stumbling through the door, snow, crusted and half dead, the sanatorium swallows him again. Warm corridors, familiar smells. The dinner bell ringing. Hans collapses into his routine like a drowning man onto shore. Here is the tragedy. Hans forgets most of his vision almost immediately. The mountain's routine erases it like snow covering tracks. His one perfect moment of clarity dissolves back into comfortable numbness. Mann tells us this directly. Hans had the dream, and the dream was true. But the mountain doesn't allow resolution. Enchantment means never quite arriving at the truth you've already glimpsed once perfectly. Years continue to pass. The narrative accelerates like a train picking up speed. What once took chapters to describe now takes sentences. Hans barely notices the acceleration. Neither, perhaps, do we. 5 years on the mountain now. The young engineer from Hamburg is unrecognizable. Hans Castorp has grown thinner, sharper. His eyes hold a philosophical distance that wasn't there before. He is becoming the mountain itself. His Hamburg relatives have given up trying to retrieve him. Letters arrive less frequently. Uncle Tienapel made one desperate rescue attempt. It did not go well. The mountain defeated him in 3 days. Uncle Tienapel arrived full of practical Hamburg determination. Within 48 hours, the altitude gave him headaches, the routine confused him, and Dr. Behrens found a suspicious spot on his lung too. Tienapel fled without even saying goodbye. He left a note and caught the morning train. Hans smiled when he read it. The mountain protects its own. Nobody escapes by simply wanting to leave. Outside the sanatorium's bubble, the real world is changing. The year is moving toward 1914. Patients argue about nations and alliances over dinner. Something enormous is gathering on the horizon. Settembrini and NAFTA have reached their breaking point. Their arguments are no longer abstract. Each sees in the other everything wrong with European civilization. Ideas have become personal hatreds. Over something trivial, a disagreement about mathematics of all things, NAFTA challenges Settembrini to a duel. Pistols, dawn. In the snow. The absurdity is total, and so is the danger. They meet at dawn in a snowy clearing. Hans stands as a witness, begging them both to stop. Settembrini raises his pistol toward the sky and fires into the air. He will not kill. Humanism refuses. NAFTA cannot bear it. The refusal to fight is worse than defeat. Screaming that Settembrini is a coward, NAFTA turns the pistol toward his own temple, philosophy consuming its own prophet. The shot echoes across the valley. NAFTA is dead in the snow. His brilliant, terrible mind silenced by its own hand. The radical who argued for suffering has inflicted the final suffering upon himself. The argument is over, and nobody won. Settembrini stands in the clearing unable to move. His opponent's death feels like his own failure. What good is humanism if it cannot prevent a man from destroying himself? The victory tastes like ash. Hans helps Settembrini back to the village. Neither speaks. 2 teachers entered Hans's life. One is dead, the other is broken, and Hans himself stands between their ruins, still unable to choose. After the duel, the mountain's enchantment begins to crack. Something in the air has changed. The comfortable timelessness feels fragile now, as if the whole structure could shatter without warning. July 1914, a telegram arrives at the sanatorium. An archduke has been assassinated in Sarajevo. Most patients glance at the headline and return to their temperatures and their rest cures. The patients continue their routines. Temperature at 7. Breakfast at 8. Rest cure at 9. The ritual is unbreakable. They have been practicing not caring for so long that actual catastrophe registers as mild annoyance. But Hans feels something different, a distant thunder only he can hear. The outside world is calling him back, not with reason or love this time, but with something far more powerful, historical necessity. War is declared. The great thunderbolt shatters 7 years of enchantment in a single morning. Nations mobilize. The sanatorium patients rush to pack. Everyone must return to their countries immediately. The sanatorium empties like water from a broken bowl. The French patients hurry to France, the Russians to Russia, the English to England. 7 years of shared meals and shared illness mean nothing against national borders. 7 years dissolve in a moment. Hans Castorp descends the mountain at last. Not because he chose to, not because he was cured, but because history reached up and dragged him down by the collar. The train descends through the same mountains he climbed 7 years ago. But the landscape he passes through now is mobilizing for war. Troop trains on parallel tracks, soldiers at every station platform. But it's not the flatland Hans left. There are no shipyards waiting, no engineering offices. The world he returns to is mud trenches and the sound of artillery. His education meets its final test. Hans in uniform, one of millions anonymous on a muddy field. The young man who spent 7 years on a mountaintop discussing philosophy and love is now advancing through shellfire toward nothing in particular. The narrator searches for Hans among the soldiers. Can we find our hero in this chaos? There, stumbling through mud, gas mask bumping against his chest. Is it really him? It's hard to say. Artillery shells tear the earth apart around him. Smoke, rain, bodies, noise. The absolute opposite of mountain stillness. Everything the sanatorium promised, peace, timelessness, rest, shattered into mud and iron. Listen carefully. Hans is singing. Through the shellfire and the screaming, Hans Castorp sings Schubert's Lindenbaum. The song about death disguised as rest. The mountain's melody, here on the killing fields. Does Hans survive? Thomas Mann says honestly that the chances are not good. Out of this universal feast of death, he writes, This world, festival of wickedness and fever, will love someday rise again. The narrator's farewell to Hans is devastatingly gentle. We are not minded to set great store by your chances, he says. Adventures of the flesh and spirit have made your story worth telling. That must suffice. The novel's final question hangs unanswered. Was the mountain time wasted, or was it the only real education Hans ever received? Did the enchantment destroy him, or did it make him fully human? Mann gives no answer. He leaves it to us. And that refusal to resolve is perhaps the most honest thing about the entire novel. Life doesn't resolve. Neither should the stories that matter most. Now let's step back from the story and look at the novel itself. Why did Thomas Mann build it this way? Why is it so long? Why does it move so strangely? The structure is the meaning. The Magic Mountain is a time novel. It doesn't just describe the experience of time. It makes you experience it. The first 100 pages cover 3 weeks. The last 100 cover years. You feel the compression. Those early chapters are deliberately long and detailed. Every meal, every temperature reading, every conversation recorded with loving precision. Because when everything is new, time moves slowly. You notice everything. Later chapters compress entire years into paragraphs. Because once routine sets in, time vanishes. Nothing distinguishes Tuesday from Thursday, January from June. Sameness devours duration. You stop noticing. The reader undergoes exactly what Hans does. Reading the early chapters, time feels abundant. Reading the later ones, years slip past unnoticed. Mann forces you to experience the mountain's enchantment in your own body. This is why the novel matters. Mann wasn't just telling a story about a man who stayed too long on a mountain. He was creating a machine that makes you feel what timelessness actually does to a human mind. The novel is philosophical experiment, form embodying meaning. The length isn't self-indulgence, it's the method. You can't understand timelessness in a short book, any more than you can understand drowning in a teaspoon. Hans Castorp was deliberately made ordinary, an unremarkable engineer, a blank page. Mann needed someone with no strong opinions, so the mountain could write its lessons on him. Any of us could be Hans. The sanatorium represents Europe before the First World War. A comfortable, sick civilization that has settled into its illness and called it culture. Luxurious, timeless, and utterly unaware that the thunderbolt is coming. Europe was sick, comfortable in its sickness, taking its temperature obsessively while ignoring the fever rising all around. Mann saw this clearly. The sanatorium was his diagnosis of an entire civilization. The thunderbolt. That's what Mann calls the war. Not a gradual awakening, but a bolt of lightning that destroys the enchanted world in a flash. Private time obliterated by historical time. No one is spared. Mann's central tension runs through every page. The contemplative life versus the active life. Should we think or should we do? Should we rest and understand, or stand up and engage? Can we possibly do both? Can we learn from withdrawal? Or must we always, eventually, return to the world and engage with it? However messy and dangerous that engagement might be, the mountain has no answer. Only the question, beautiful and permanent. Let's look deeper at the novel's symbolic architecture. Mountain versus flatland. These aren't just settings. They're opposing philosophies of how to live, vertical versus horizontal, standing versus lying down. The horizontal life means lying down, being a patient, submitting to rest cures and temperature readings, giving up on time, on ambition, on the world below. It means becoming part of the mountain's stillness. The vertical life means standing up, walking into offices, building ships, making decisions. It means time mattering, deadlines pressing, the clock moving forward instead of circling. It means being fully in the world. Hans chose horizontal. He lay down on the mountain and gained 7 years of insight. But those 7 years cost him his career, his connections, his youth, and possibly his life. The price of contemplation is steep. Is 7 years too long to learn wisdom? Sedembrini would say yes without hesitation. A week is too long. Go home, stand up, act. Wisdom that doesn't lead to action is just another form of sleep. Action is everything, Settembrini would argue. Writing, organizing, fighting for justice. The pen and the word are weapons against darkness. Thought without action is death dressed in contemplation's comfortable robes. Nafta's answer was the opposite. Suffering and submission reveal truths that reason cannot reach. Surrender your ego, embrace the mystery. The comfortable rational world is a lie built on sand. Peppercorn's answer had no words at all. Feel everything. Live at full intensity. The body and its sensations are the only real philosophy. The moment you stop feeling, you might as well be dead. Clavdia's answer was desire itself. Follow what you want. Resist convention. Exist in the moment of attraction without apology. Slam the door on propriety and walk through life on your own careless terms. Hans never fully accepted any single answer. That's his gift and his tragedy. He listened to everyone, absorbed everything, synthesized nothing. His education was real but permanently incomplete, like a sentence missing its final word. Remember the snow vision. That one perfect moment when Hans understood everything. Beauty and horror, life and death, love defying the grave. It was the novel's secret heart, beating once, then falling silent. Why does Hans forget? Because the mountain erases resolution. Enchantment means staying comfortable in the question. The moment you find an answer, the mountain dissolves it back into uncertainty, like sugar in warm milk. Now consider the novel's treatment of love. In Mann's world, desire and disease are interchangeable. The fever of attraction and the fever of tuberculosis share the same thermometer. Hans's love is literally an illness. Hans's love for Claudia cannot be separated from his sickness. She is the mountain given a body and a face. To love her is to love illness, timelessness. The horizontal life, she is enchantment made flesh. The pencil motif ties everything together. Young Hans borrowing a pencil from Hippie. Adult Hans asking Claudia for a pencil on carnival night. The same gesture decades apart. Desire repeating itself like a melody. Mann uses the X-ray as a symbol of ultimate intimacy. Hans carrying Claudia's skeletal portrait in his breast pocket means knowing someone beneath their skin, beneath even their flesh. Bones don't lie or perform. Death runs through the novel like an underground river. Always present, always normalized. Patients die regularly, bodies are removed discreetly. And the surviving patients continue their afternoon tea without missing a sip. The bobsled motif is especially haunting. Bodies transported down the mountain on bobsleds in winter, sliding past the windows of living patients who avert their eyes. Death departing by the same route the living arrived. Joachim's death is the novel's emotional center, not because it's the most dramatic, but because Joachim earned something Hans never did, the right to be mourned without ambiguity. His death was clean. His life had direction. Joachim tried to live his life. He didn't philosophize about it, didn't debate it, didn't analyze it. He simply wanted to serve. And the mountain wouldn't let him. His courage deserves to be remembered tonight. Mann structured the novel around the number 7. 7 years on the mountain. 7 tables in the dining hall. 7 main chapters in some editions. The hermetic number of transformation and magic. There's hermetic symbolism running beneath the surface. The magic mountain is an alchemical crucible, a sealed vessel where base material is transformed through heat, pressure, and time into something new, or destroyed in the attempt. Hans is the alchemical subject, the plain lead of a Hamburg engineer placed in the mountain's crucible. Heat applied through fever, pressure through intellectual challenge. 7 years of transformation, but into what? Gold or ash? The magic mountain belongs to the Bildungsroman tradition, the education novel. A young person enters the world and learns through experience. But Mann takes that tradition and twists it into something stranger and more honest. In a traditional Bildungsroman, the hero learns and then acts on what he's learned. He enters society improved. But Hans learns and stalls. He enters not society, but a battlefield. The education leads nowhere safe. Is this education or elaborate procrastination? Mann's irony operates on every level. He makes us love the mountain's enchantment, Even as he shows us its danger, we're enchanted too. That's the joke and the warning. People often overlook how funny this novel is. Mann is frequently hilarious. The humor is dry, ironic, sometimes devastating. It keeps the philosophical weight from crushing the story beneath its own seriousness. Frostiher's malapropisms are comedy gold. She says, cosmetic, when she means cosmic. She confuses cremation with creation. Her mangled vocabulary is Mann's gentlest satire, the pretension of the semi-educated, rendered with surprising affection. Even Settembrini gets Mann's gentle mockery. The organ grinder comparison, a nod to his Italian heritage and his relentless, musical repetition of Enlightenment ideals. Mann loves the man he laughs at. That's the trick. Dr. Behrens is another comic figure. The chief physician who paints terrible portraits in his spare time, using patients as models. His art is as questionable as his medical advice, and equally well-intentioned. The thermometer obsession is both absurd and profound. Patients treating 1/10 of a degree like a matter of life and death. An entire community organized around mercury in a glass tube. Mann makes it hilarious and then makes it meaningful. Mann uses comedy to make the philosophical weight bearable. Without Frostiher and her malapropisms, without Behrens and his terrible paintings, the ideas would crush the life from the novel. Humor is the oxygen between the stones. The novel is built like music. Mann drew from Wagner's method of leitmotifs, recurring themes associated with characters and ideas. The pencil returns. The door slam returns. The thermometer returns, each time carrying more weight. Wagner used recurring melodies to bind hours of opera together. Mann used recurring images and phrases to bind hundreds of pages. Both understood that repetition with variation creates meaning that accumulates like snow, invisible until suddenly you're buried. The Lindenbaum is the novel's hidden heart. Schubert's song about beauty and death and Germany. Hans plays it obsessively because it says what he cannot articulate, that he loves the thing that's killing him. The wanderer in Schubert's song hears the linden tree whispering, "Come rest beneath me. Close your eyes. You'll find peace here." It's the sweetest and most dangerous invitation in all of German art. Hans recognizes the song's deadly invitation clearly. He knows exactly what the linden tree offers, and he loves it anyway. This is Mann's most devastating insight. We can see the trap and still refuse to leave it. Germany's romance with death. Mann saw it with painful clarity, years before the war proved him right. A culture intoxicated by beauty, by depth, by the seductive darkness of its own philosophical tradition. The Mountain was Germany itself. The novel was published in 1924. Between two wars. The first had just ended, the second was already germinating. Mann had written a warning disguised as a bedtime story, and hardly anyone heard the alarm. Mann began writing it as a short story around 1912, a comic companion to Death in Venice. But the material kept growing. The short story became a novella. The novella became a novel. The novel became 1,000 pages. It grew because Mann realized Hans's story was Europe's story. One man enchanted on a mountain was an anecdote. An entire civilization enchanted before a catastrophe was an epic. The material demanded the scale. The sanatorium was based on a real place. Mann's wife, Kachia, was a patient at a sanatorium in Davos. Mann visited her there in 1912. He walked the same corridors Hans would walk in fiction. During his visit, the doctors told Mann he had a moist spot on his own lung. Just like Hans. The invitation was real. Stay, rest, become a patient. The mountain reached for Mann as it reached for his character. Mann left after 3 weeks. Hans Kastrup did not. That decision, to descend, to return to the flatland, to keep writing, was the choice the novel explores but its author never had to make. He was lucky enough to leave. The autobiographical seed, what if Mann had stayed? What if the moist spot had been real? What if the 3-week visit had become 7 years? The novel is Mann's answer to his own luckiest escape. The novel is Mann's self-interrogation. He questioned his own contemplative nature, his love of art over action, his tendency to observe rather than participate. Am I hands? Am I wasting my life in beautiful withdrawal? Was Mann more Settembrini or hands? Probably a bit of both. The moralist who believed in engagement and the artist who loved withdrawal. That tension powered 12 years of writing and 1,000 pages of prose. When the novel appeared in November 1920, 4 reactions were overwhelming. Some readers found it bewildering. Others recognized it immediately as a masterpiece. Almost everyone agreed on one thing: nothing like it had been written before. In 1929, Mann received the Nobel Prize in Literature, partly for Buddenbrooks, his first novel. Partly for this, the Swedish Academy recognized a writer who had diagnosed his civilization's illness with uncomfortable precision. Mann's relationship with Germany was the great love affair of his life. He praised it, criticized it, mourned it, and eventually was exiled from it. Germany was his Claudia, beautiful, maddening, impossible to abandon completely. The Magic Mountain was a farewell to the world before the war, to the comfortable enchantments of European civilization, to the belief that you could think your way to safety while the building burned around you. Edwardian certainties were dissolving as Mann wrote. Class, empire, progress. All the pillars that held up the comfortable world were cracking. The sanatorium patients couldn't hear the cracking because the mountains muffled everything. The sanatorium patients are passengers on a sinking ship. Comfortable, well-fed, entertained, taking their temperatures with meticulous care while the waterline rises. Mann loved them even as he saw them drowning. Mann's compassion is the novel's secret ingredient. He makes fun of his characters and loves them simultaneously. Settembrini is ridiculous and heroic. Frostier is absurd and human. Even NAFTA earns our pity in the end. That compassion extends to us. We too are enchanted, comfortable, perhaps too still. Mann wrote about his time, but he also wrote about ours. The mountain has many addresses. We might be living at one of them right now. Who was Thomas Mann? The question itself is enormous. He was one of the 20th century's greatest writers, and one of its most contradictory. Public moralist, private struggler, exile, icon, father, doubter. Born in 1875 in Lobeck, a prosperous Hanseatic port city on the Baltic. Old merchant money, solid brick houses, a world of commerce, respectability, and tradition that would become his first subject and lasting obsession. His father was a grain merchant and a senator in the city government. His mother came from Brazil, of partly Portuguese descent, with an artistic temperament that clashed beautifully with Hanseatic solidity. The tension was productive. Young Thomas preferred reading to business. When his father died, the family grain firm was dissolved. The merchant dynasty ended not with a crisis, but with a quiet surrender. The artist's son had no interest in continuing it. The outsider artist, that's how Mann saw himself. Caught between the bourgeois world of his father and the artistic world he craved. Too respectable to be bohemian, too artistic to be a businessman. The gap became his subject. Buddenbrooks, published when Mann was only 25. The decline of a merchant family across 4 generations. Instant fame. The pattern established. Mann would always write about decline, decay, and the dissolution of certainties. Decline, decay, and time. Mann returned to these themes again and again throughout his career. He was drawn to endings, to the moment before collapse, to the beauty of things falling gracefully apart. Death in Venice came in 1912, the same year Mann visited Davos. A famous writer follows beauty to his destruction in plague-ridden Venice. Desire, death, and artistic obsession compressed into a devastating novella. The Magic Mountain began around 1913 as a companion piece to Death in Venice, a comic counterpart. What if the enchanted setting were a sanatorium instead of a plague city? What if the hero survived? Maybe. Then the war came, and everything changed. World War I interrupted the novel and interrupted Mann. To his lasting shame, he initially supported the war, defending German militarism against Western democratic values. Reflections of a non-political man. the book Mann wrote during the war defending German depth against Western civilization. He argued that German culture was superior precisely because it was unpolitical. He was spectacularly wrong. He later repudiated that position completely. The reflections became a source of deep embarrassment. Mann's political transformation, from conservative nationalist to defender of democracy, was painful, genuine, and permanent. The Magic Mountain reflects this transformation. Sedembrunny's democratic ideals, once annoying to Mann, gradually became the novel's moral compass. The humanist won the argument in the book because Mann let him win in his own heart. Mann's marriage to Keisha Pringsheim in 1905 was the central partnership of his life. She was a mathematician from a wealthy Munich Jewish family. Brilliant, practical, and essential to everything he accomplished. Keisha's sanatorium stay in Davos was the spark. She went for her lungs. Mann visited. The doctors examined him too. And somewhere between the balcony rest cures and the mountain air, a novel began to germinate. They had 6 children: Erika Klaas, Golo Monica Elizabeth Michael. A formidable dynasty of talent and trouble. Several became writers themselves, continuing the family habit of turning private life into literature. Klaas and Erika especially became writers and activists. Klaas wrote Mephisto, a novel about an actor's complicity with Nazism. Erika became a cabaret performer and journalist. The children carried their father's moral questioning into new territory. Mann's secret inner life added another dimension of tension. His diaries, published after his death, revealed deep attractions to young men. The public patriarch, the Nobel laureate, carrying a private struggle beneath every polished sentence. The tension between public respectability and private desire runs through everything Mann wrote. A Shinbach in Venice, Hands enchanted by Claudia. Tonio Croce torn between art and life. Each character carries a version of Mann's central wound. This tension mirrors Hans Castorp perfectly. Outward propriety, inward turmoil. A respectable Hamburg engineer consumed by desires he cannot name properly. For a woman, for knowledge, for the mountain's dangerous stillness. Mann's writing process was ruthlessly disciplined. Morning hours only 9 to 12. A fixed number of pages. Immaculate manuscripts with barely a crossing out. The bourgeois' work ethic applied to art with Prussian precision. 12 years to write The Magic Mountain. 1912 to 1924, interrupted by war and doubt. A novel about time. Written across more time than its author could have predicted when he started. The novel kept growing because the material demanded expansion. Every character insisted on more scenes. Every idea demanded fuller exploration. Mann couldn't stop because the mountain wouldn't let him stop. The author was enchanted too. Published in November 1924, 2 thick volumes. An immediate bestseller in Germany. The reading public, still raw from the war, recognized something essential in Mann's portrait of a lost enchanted world. Critics were divided but impressed. Some found it bewildering. Too long, too philosophical, too digressive. Others saw immediately that the length and the philosophy were not obstacles but the point. The form was the content. These were the Weimar Republic years. Germany caught between democracy and extremism. The fragile new government trying to hold together a nation traumatized by defeat, inflation, and the lingering poison of old imperial dreams. Mann became a public voice for democracy during these years. His political transformation complete, he gave speeches defending the Republic, urging Germans to embrace democratic values. The former nationalist became the Republic's most famous literary defender. The Nobel Prize in 1929 sealed his international standing. Thomas Mann, Germany's literary ambassador to the world. The boy from L.E. Beck who wrote about declining merchants was now the voice of German civilization itself. Then the Nazis rose. Everything Mann had warned about. The seduction of unreason, the romance with death, the contempt for democratic values, materialized as a political movement with terrifying speed and efficiency. 1933. Mann was abroad on a lecture tour when Hitler came to power. His children telephoned, "Don't come home." He never returned to Germany permanently. The exile began, and with it a wound that never fully healed. His books were burned. Mann's novels, among thousands of others, fed to flames by young men who had been students only months before. The Magic Mountain, that meditation on civilization, reduced to ash in a university square. Exile took Mann to Switzerland first, then America. Princeton, New Jersey, then Pacific Palisades, California, a German writer on the Pacific coast. Surrounded by other refugees, writing about Germany from the furthest possible distance. Mann continued writing in exile with extraordinary productivity. The Joseph Tetralogy. 4 massive novels retelling the biblical story. Then Dr. Faustus, perhaps his darkest work. The exile didn't silence him. It sharpened everything. Dr. Faustus, published in 1947. A composer makes a pact with the devil in exchange for genius. Germany's pact with National Socialism retold as a Faust legend. Mann's most anguished reckoning with his homeland's catastrophe. The Magic Mountain's themes echoed through history more loudly than Mann could have imagined. Enchantment, illness, the comfortable withdrawal from reality, the thunderbolt that shatters everything. The 20th century kept proving him right. During the war, Mann broadcast radio addresses to Germany. German listeners. He would begin. His voice transmitted from California across the Atlantic, reaching occupied living rooms where people risked their lives to hear him. After the war, Mann visited Germany but chose not to stay. The country was in ruins. The people who burned his books were now asking for his blessing. He gave speeches but kept his distance. Some wounds heal, some don't. The pain of exile never left him. Loving a country that had gone mad. Watching from California as everything German was destroyed or perverted. Writing in a language whose homeland had betrayed every value that language had ever expressed. Thomas Mann died in 1955 in Zurich. Still writing, still questioning. He had returned to Switzerland, not Germany. But close enough to hear the language in the streets. Close enough to almost be home. Now let's consider the historical world the novel entered. 1924. The Great War was 6 years past. Its wounds were fresh. Its lessons were being forgotten. And its sequel was already being prepared in shadows. The Spanish flu had killed millions just years before. Pandemic, quarantine, temperature taking. Mann's readers in 1924 understood sanatorium culture viscerally. They had lived through their own version of the Magic Mountain. Tuberculosis occupied a strange place in the cultural imagination. The romantic disease, the artist's disease. Keats, Chopin, the Bront sisters, all consumed by it. To be tubercular was, in some terrible way, to be interesting. Real sanatoriums in Davos were luxury retreats. The wealthy went to be ill in comfort. Private rooms, gourmet meals, mountain views. Tuberculosis for the rich was an extended holiday with medical supervision and an uncertain return date. The sanatorium culture was real and elaborate. Strict daily routines, social hierarchies at mealtimes, the constant taking of temperatures, the gossip, the flirtations, the careful not mentioning of death. Mann barely had to invent anything. Freud and psychoanalysis were rising during these years. Dr. Krokowski embodies this new science, the belief that the unconscious drives everything. That repressed desire causes illness. That talk could cure what medicine couldn't reach. Pre-war Europe was an intellectual battlefield where every idea competed for dominance. Democracy, socialism, nationalism, mysticism, scientism, nihilism. Settembrini and NAFTA aren't just characters. They're entire intellectual traditions given voices and mustaches. Nietzsche's shadow falls across the novel. The death of God, the will to power, the Superman. NAFTA channels some of this. The radical critique of bourgeois morality, the embrace of danger over safety, the contempt for comfortable mediocrity. Schopenhauer's pessimism also haunts the novel. The world is suffering, will and representation. The idea that life is essentially painful, and that resignation might be the wisest response. The mountain as Schopenhauerian retreat from the world's agony. Goethe stands behind Mann as a model. The great German humanist writer. The man who balanced art and action, intellect and feeling, poetry and politics. Sedembrini quotes Goethe. Mann aspired to be the Goethe of his own century. Mann stood on all these shoulders. Goethe, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Wagner, Freud. He synthesized a century of German thought into a novel about a young man with a fever on a mountain. The simplicity contains the cosmos. A century has passed since The Magic Mountain was published. 100 years. And the novel has not aged a day. If anything, it reads more urgently now than when Mann first put down his pen. The novel's influence spread immediately. Writers across Europe recognized something unprecedented. A book that used the form of fiction to think as deeply as philosophy, while remaining compulsively readable as a story. Hermann Hesse praised it as a landmark. Another German, language novelist exploring similar territory. The interior life, the quest for meaning, the tension between Eastern and Western thought. Kindred spirits on parallel mountain paths. The novel entered university curricula within a generation. Required reading in literature departments worldwide. One of those books professors assign, knowing it will change some students forever and mystify others completely. Adaptations have been attempted. A German television film in 1982, stage versions, radio dramas. Each struggles with the same fundamental problem. How do you dramatize 7 years of a man lying on a balcony thinking? The difficulty of adaptation is itself revealing. The novel's power lies in its duration, in the slow accumulation of detail, in the way Mann's prose mimics the experience of time dissolving. No film can compress that without destroying it. No film can replicate the experience of spending weeks inside Mann's prose. The reading itself is the mountain. You have to climb it yourself, at your own pace, losing track of time as Hans does. There are no shortcuts to enchantment. The novel's influence on later writers who explored time and consciousness is vast. Anyone who tried to make fiction think, really think, not just describe thinking, owes something to Mann's mountain experiment. Marcel Proust was writing at the same time. Both Mann and Proust created sealed worlds where time behaves differently. Both used illness as a lens for understanding life. Both demanded that readers surrender weeks of their lives. James Joyce was expanding what the novel could contain at the very same moment. Ulysses, published 2 years before The Magic Mountain. Together Mann, Proust, and Joyce rewrote the rules of what fiction could attempt. The encyclopedic novel tradition continues through the 20th century. Mann, Proust, Joyce, Musil, Pynchon. Novels that try to contain everything. Science, philosophy, history, love, death. Between two covers. The Magic Mountain is the tradition's high peak. Then something unexpected happened. A pandemic. In 2020 the world went into lockdown. And suddenly, millions of people understood Hans Castorp's predicament from the inside. Isolation, illness. Time dissolving into nothing. Readers in lockdown recognize themselves in Hans Castorp. Trapped indoors, watching time lose its shape, taking temperatures daily, wondering when normal life would resume. The parallels were almost too precise to be coincidence. The thermometer obsession suddenly made perfect sense. Daily temperature checks, tracking decimal points. The entire world suddenly understood what Mann's patients knew, that a tiny number on a glass tube could determine your entire fate. Beyond the pandemic, the novel's deepest question remains urgent. How do we use our time? Not the big philosophical question, but the daily one. What are we doing with the hours we've been given? The question of engagement versus withdrawal is still with us. Should we disconnect to think more clearly? Or does disconnection just become another word for avoidance? Hans never decided. Neither have we. Are we enchanted right now? Consider it honestly. Comfortable routines, endless distractions, the world's crisis visible on screens but held at arm's length. We might be living on our own magic mountain without realizing it. Imagine Hans Castorp with a smartphone. Infinite distraction at his fingertips. Would he ever have left the mountain? The enchantment Mann described has only multiplied. We carry our magic mountains in our pockets now. The flatland today looks different but feels the same. Productivity culture. Always busy, always performing. Never still enough to ask the questions that silence makes possible. Settembrini would approve. Hands might miss something important. What the mountain offers is forced stillness. Confrontation with mortality. Time to read and think and question the assumptions you've been handed. These are not small gifts, even if they cost more than most people want to pay. What the mountain takes is years, ambition, connection to the living world, the ability to act decisively. Hands gained wisdom but lost the capacity to use it. The tuition was paid in irreplaceable time. Settembrini's warning resonates in any age. Don't waste your life in passive consumption. Don't confuse comfort with purpose. The horizontal life is a beautiful trap, and every generation builds its own version of the sanatorium. NAFTA's temptation is equally modern. Nihilism, radicalism, the seductive appeal of tearing everything down because the system is flawed. The intellectual who would rather destroy the world than live in its imperfection. We see him everywhere now. Peppercorn's lesson might be the most needed today. Presence, feeling, being fully alive in the moment instead of analyzing it to death. Put down the thermometer and the philosophy book. Pick up the wine glass. Feel something. Claudia's lesson is about desire disrupting all our careful plans. You can organize your life perfectly, build routines, maintain discipline. Then a glass door slams and someone walks in, and nothing is ever the same again. Joachim's lesson is perhaps the simplest and the hardest. Duty deserves respect, even when it's futile. Sometimes the bravest thing is not the grand philosophical gesture, but the daily discipline of trying to live your life, despite everything working against you. The novel is a mirror. Every reader finds themselves in a different character. That's Mann's deepest trick. He built the mountain to accommodate everyone who climbs it, and everyone comes back changed in different ways. Some readers are Hands, curious, passive, endlessly absorbing information, but never quite converting knowledge into action. The eternal student, who loves learning so much they forget to graduate and enter the world. Some readers are Joachim, disciplined, practical, frustrated by all the talking. They want to get on with things. They read the novel impatiently, wondering why Hands doesn't just go home. Their impatience is its own kind of wisdom. Some are Settembrini, idealistic, verbal, believing that the right words can save the world. They read the novel as an argument for engagement and mark the passages where the Italian speaks with the most conviction. And some, perhaps uncomfortably, are NAFTA, intellectual, cynical, drawn to darkness. They recognize his arguments as seductive and dangerous and find themselves nodding along despite themselves. That recognition is Mann's warning gift. The novel doesn't judge. That's its extraordinary achievement. It presents all paths with equal wretchedness, equal sympathy, equal irony. Mann loved every character enough to give them their best arguments and their deepest flaws. Mann's gift was making you hold contradictions without resolving them. Settembrini is right. NAFTA is right. Both are wrong. The mountain is dangerous and necessary. Illness destroys and illuminates. Life demands both thought and action. The German word Bildung means something deeper than education. It means the total formation of a human being. Not just learning facts, but becoming. Through experience, through suffering, through beauty. A more complete person. Hans's Bildung is real but incomplete. Like all of ours, we are all partly formed, partly raw material. The novel doesn't promise completion. It promises the attempt. And the attempt, Mann suggests, might be enough. Might be everything. Reading the novel itself teaches patience. 700 pages. Dense, philosophical, sometimes challenging. It demands the kind of time that the modern world insists we don't have. Making that time is part of the Bildung. Some readers give up. The length defeats them. The philosophy exhausts them. The slow pace drives them back to shorter, faster entertainment. There's no shame in it. The mountain isn't for everyone. But for those who finish understand. The length was the point. You cannot understand 7 years in 7 hours. You need to feel the accumulation, the repetition, the slow dissolving of time's normal structure. The reading was the mountain. You have to spend time on the mountain to understand the mountain. There are no shortcuts. No summaries that capture it. No adaptations that replace it. You have to lie down on the balcony and breathe the thin air yourself. And when you come down from the reading, you're different. Even if you can't explain how. Something about the way you think about time, about illness, about love, about the precious fleeting strangeness of being alive. It has shifted permanently. So here we are, at the end of our own mountain stay. We've climbed through 700 pages of story, philosophy, love, and loss. The air is thinner up here and clearer. Let's take a last long breath. What remains after the mountain? Not answers. Mann refused to give us those, and he was right to refuse. Answers close doors. Questions keep them open. The mountain's gift is better questions, asked more gently. Hans learned that time is not what clocks measure. It bends and stretches and sometimes stops altogether. 3 weeks can contain a lifetime. 7 years can pass like a single afternoon. We've felt this ourselves tonight. Hans learned that illness and health are not opposites but neighbors. That the body's fragility is what makes consciousness possible. That fever opens doors which comfortable health keeps firmly shut. Strange lessons, gently taught. Hans learned that love arrives uninvited and changes everything it touches. A slamming door, a borrowed pencil, a woman's X-ray held up to mountain light. These are not small things. These are the architecture of a life. He learned that ideas matter. That philosophy is not decoration, but survival equipment. That the argument between reason and faith, progress and tradition, is not academic. It's the argument inside every person who has ever tried to live deliberately. Above all, Hans learned that death is present in every room, at every meal, on every mountain path. Not as horror, but as the condition that makes everything else matter. Without the ending, the story would mean nothing. For the sake of goodness and love, man shall grant death no sovereignty over his thoughts. Hans said this once in a snowstorm, between sleep and waking. It is the novel's heartbeat. It deserves to be remembered. The mountain is still there. Davos still exists, though the sanatoriums have mostly become hotels and conference centers now. The Alps haven't changed. The thin air still makes visitors lightheaded. The enchantment still works on anyone willing to be still. The evening settles around us now. The air cools. The light softens into those shades of blue and violet that only mountains know. Our time on the summit is ending, and the valley waits below with its clocks and obligations. Before we descend, one last look around. The mountain at dusk is the most beautiful version of itself. Everything simplified by the failing light, shapes soften, edges blur. The details that filled our day dissolve into larger forms. Think of the people we met on this mountain. Hans with his mild blue eyes, gradually opening to everything the world could teach him. His journey was quiet, internal, unheroic by any conventional measure, but what a journey it was. Sedembrini, waving his thin hands against the darkness. Nafta, brilliant and doomed. Peppercorn, enormous with life. Claudia, careless and necessary. Joachim, brave and brief. Each one carrying a truth, each one carrying a wound. Thomas Mann writing at his desk in Munich, then in exile, then in California, then in Zurich. A man who poured a civilization into a novel, and hoped the novel would outlast the civilization's worst instincts. It has. Night approaches the mountain now. The stars are coming out, one by one, the way the novel's themes emerged, slowly at first, then all at once, until the sky is full of them, bright and innumerable and old. The sanatorium windows go dark one by one, patients settling into their beds, blankets drawn up, the horizontal life entering its most honest phase, sleep, where all philosophy quiets and the body simply rests. The gramophone has been turned off for the night. The Lindenbaum is silent. No Schubert, no philosophy, No arguments drifting through corridors. Just the mountain's own music, wind in pine branches, snow settling, stars turning. Let the mountain keep its secrets tonight. The questions about time and love and death, and the meaning of illness. Let them rest alongside you. They'll still be there in the morning, patient as snowfall. You've been with us on the mountain for a long time now. Thank you for climbing. Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening to the stories the thin air carries. Not everyone makes the ascent. You did. The mountain will be here tomorrow. And the day after. It was here before Hans Castorp arrived, and it remained after he left. Mountains outlast their visitors. That's their comfort and their melancholy. Somewhere in the novel's final pages, Mann writes that out of this festival of death, love might someday rise again. He leaves it as a question. The most hopeful kind of question. One that expects a beautiful answer without demanding it. Let the snow fall. Let the wind whisper through the pine branches. Let the sanatorium sleep with its memories of all the lives that passed through its corridors. Tonight, the mountain is at peace. And so are we. Close your eyes now if they're heavy. The mountain won't mind. It has held sleeping visitors for centuries. The balcony chairs are comfortable. The blankets are warm. The thin air makes drowsiness feel like wisdom. The debates have ended for tonight. Settembrini voice has faded into the corridor. Nafta's study is dark. Even Peppercorn's laughter has quieted to a memory. The ideas will wait. They're in no hurry. Ideas never are. Somewhere far below in the flatland, the world keeps spinning. But up here, at this altitude, the spinning slows. The air is thin and sweet. Tomorrow can wait. It always can when you're on the mountain. The stars above the Berghof are the same stars that shone over Hans and Joachim and Claudia. The same light that touched the Mediterranean paradise in Hans's vision. Starlight is patient. Starlight waits. Let the snow be your blanket tonight. Let the mountain's silence be your lullaby. You have read well. You have listened well. The mountain thanks its visitors by letting them rest. If you dream tonight, perhaps you'll find yourself on a sunlit Mediterranean shore. Children laughing. Philosophers talking softly. The warm stone of ancient temples. The beautiful world that exists behind the closed eyes of someone who has climbed high enough to see it. Or perhaps you'll dream of nothing at all. That's good too. The deepest rest has no pictures, no philosophy, no arguments. Just the body breathing, the heart beating, the beautiful machinery of being alive doing its quiet work. The Lindenbaum plays one last time, very faintly, very far away. Come rest beneath me, the tree whispers. But tonight, the invitation is gentle, not dangerous. Tonight, it's just a lullaby. Rest is not surrender when the day has been full. The mountain breathes in the darkness. A slow, deep breath. You can feel it if you're quiet enough. The expansion and contraction of a world that is alive and ancient and patient beyond any human understanding. For the sake of goodness and love. Remember that. Let it settle into your sleep like snow into a valley. Not as a command or a lesson, but as a wish. A quiet wish from a man on a mountain, a century ago, to you tonight. Good night from the magic mountain. Good night from the Berghof with its balconies, and its blankets, and its beautiful difficult questions. The mountain will keep watch while you sleep. It always does. Sleep well. Dream of mountains and thin air and the sound of snow falling on a quiet world. Tomorrow, the flatland waits. But tonight, you're here. Tonight, you're on the mountain. And the mountain holds you gently. Good night.